What is going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. In today's review, we are going to be taking a look at the Hidition Viento. Now, before we hop on into today's review, I just have to give a big shout out to the viewer who provided these for review, and I will be returning them back to him when I'm finished with the video. But once again, big thanks to him for letting me borrow these for review. Now, to those of you in the United States, this might be a somewhat unfamiliar name, Hidition. Hidition is a Korean IEM brand, and to my understanding, they are kind of hard to buy and order from. I know people, even in the Southeast Asia area, sometimes have trouble ordering these, to my knowledge, at least with like the customs, but other people tell me it's not too hard to order, so I don't particularly know. They don't seem to be really distributed anywhere. You kind of have to order directly from their site and try to, I guess, translate your Korean or have them translate your English to Korean or whatever. So they're pretty much just a Korean brand. That's basically what you need to know. So if you are looking to buy a set of these, if you speak Korean, that's definitely going to be to your advantage. But anyway, the Viento here is a IEM that comes in quite a few different versions. So there are universal and custom versions. This one is obviously a universal, and the shell designs are all custom made to order. When you order it, you can pick your design, like your shell color and faceplates and artwork or whatever. This one's like, I guess, like a dark blue, glittery with like a snowflake and I don't know, some kind of symbol there. So, and this particular unit is the Viento B, which is the base heavier version of the Viento. But let's go ahead and get specs out of the way. So the Viento is about an $800 or $900 IEM, depends on how you spec it, and I think the customs are slightly more. And I really can't find too much in terms of specs about these because there's not too much coverage of them out there, and everything is basically in Korean. But basically, the only interesting thing to know about it is that it's a 4 balanced armature IEM, no dynamic drivers, just 4 balanced armatures. So let's go ahead and hop on into the build of the Viento. So the Viento is using just a plastic shell, at least on this particular one. It looks very nice, at least in this finish, with the nice kind of gold little logos or symbols here on the faceplates, and a nice somewhat transparent shell. And the shape of them is kind of rather odd. It's oddly curvy, kind of a bulbous shape with a fairly long nozzle, if the camera will focus. There we go. And these are not the stock tips. These are Symbio tips. I will link these in the description below because they are my favorite IEM tips. But you do get a host of silicone tips with them. So that is the build of the IEM itself. As for the included cable, this is the included cable with the Viento. It's a very nice, light, and pliable, like silver-coated copper cable with 2-pin connectors, which is my preferred connector type, 3.5mm. And yeah, this is a pretty good stock cable. No complaints there. This is the box they come in. It says, "Listen what you really hear." Okay, we will do that. Inside, you just have a little, small little hard case, and this is your ear tips, cleaning brush. There's also a little rag in there to clean them. So that is the accessories of the Viento. Now, as for comfort, so this is the universal Viento. Now, obviously, if you get a custom one, then your comfort's going to be basically perfect. Now, the universal one, though, at least for me, I find pretty uncomfortable. This IEM has got a weird, like, curve, a really thick, big curve here that like smashes into my inner ear, and it causes me pretty big discomfort relatively quickly. If this was shaved back just a little bit, so it wasn't as tall, it would work for me. But since it basically just extends, makes like, I don't know, like a full 90-degree right angle, it just hits my ear funny, and I don't find it particularly comfortable, at least to me. But I know in-ear shape varies a lot, so your mileage may vary. But for me, I do not find the Viento particularly comfortable to wear. Okay, so now moving on into the sound of the Hidition Viento B. So starting off with the bass, the Viento B has about a 5 or 6 dB bass shelf, starting at 20 hertz that pretty much flattens out by the time you hit 100. So it has kind of a Harman like bass shelf on the Viento B here. After that, you have a really nice mid-range tuning. I mentioned this in my review of the Moondrop Blessing 2, but this is basically that etymotic mid-range tuning. So it's what I would classify as a really neutral mid-range, maybe slightly forward for some depending on your preference, but I find this a really, really nice mid-range tuning. And they also have, I would say, a really nice inline treble region with really, really good air. The Viento has really nice above 10K air. So overall, the Viento is neutral with a little bit of a bass boost on the B. If you get like the A or the reference, then it's basically flat, slightly warm. But the Viento B's got a little bit of like a harmonish bass shelf with diffuse field mids and a little bit more upper treble. And again, like I mentioned in my review of the Blessing 2, this measures in the mid-range and the treble basically identically to the Blessing 2, but the Viento has much better air, as well as some other aspects that we will talk about here in just a second. So as for detail, the Viento is a very, very detailed IEM. For its about $800 or $900 price point, it is definitely up to par in terms of detail. It seems to be right up there in the lines with the Sony IERM9, the Campfire Andromeda, all the big players at around that $1,000 price point. It is definitely right up there competing with them. It is a very, very detailed IEM, very, very resolving, handily out-resolves the Blessing 2. Now, in terms of dynamics, the Viento has very, very nice attack and decay, which I guess is not technically dynamics, but we're going to start with that anyway. So very, very sharp attack, very, very quick tactility. It's very, very quick on its attacks. It decays really nice. But your bass is a little bit limp. It's pretty limp. It's got BA bass. Much like the ER4 here, I'd say it's about around as good as ER4 bass, but this one's a little bit more boosted, which I think helps compensate for it a little bit, but it is very, very weak bass. So you're not getting much slam, you're not getting much rumble. But like I said, your other areas, your micro dynamics are really good, really quick, and good macro dynamics overall, but your bass dynamics are lacking. But other areas, head stage is nothing too amazing. It's wider than the ER4, but I wouldn't say it's anything more so than average. Imaging is really good, really, really precise imaging on the Viento. In terms of timbre, not particularly great, certainly pretty strong BA timbre here. Better than the ER4, but BA timbre nonetheless. And that is about all the areas of the sound of the Viento. So now as for my thoughts and comparisons, so the Hidition Viento before the Moondrop Blessing 2, I would have said was the etymotic ER4 upgrade. So in terms of like its timbre, its bass, and its general qualities, the Viento sounds a lot closer to the ER4 than the B2 does, more so than just its frequency response. But again, the Viento is much more detailed. It has more treble, which the ER4 needed, and it has much better air. So in terms of sounding more so like an ER4 than the Blessing 2 does, this is more so etymotic sounding than the Blessing 2 was. But the areas where this lacks from the Blessing 2 is the bass. The Blessing 2 has much, much better bass given its dynamic driver. And I don't mean more, because the Blessing 2 measures with less bass than the Viento B does, but it's just much more dynamic and much punchier because it's a dynamic driver. But the Viento, like I mentioned earlier, is much more detailed than Blessing 2 with much sharper transients, much faster attack and decay. And it's a much more technically proficient IEM with basically perfect tuning. The bass tuning on this is really nice. I like the little bit of bass shelf on the Viento B with basically spot on mid-range and treble tuning and beautiful air. So the Viento B's tuning is just top tier. This is about as good as it gets in terms of an IEM for tuning. And then as for competitors, do I like this more than the Andromeda? Yes. Do I like it more than the IER M9? Not sure. I've only heard the M9 in show conditions, but it too seems very detailed. Tuning is not quite as good as this, but it fit me better than this does, and I think it's built nicer. So M9 is going to be really this one's, I'd say, probably primary competitor for most people. Or you could do the Blessing too and lose detail and some of those transients, but get really good bass. So those are really your big options here. But overall, the Hidition Viento is a fantastic IEM that is well worth its price point, and it gets my recommendation if you can figure out how to order one. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review of the Hidition Viento. Links of where to buy these in the description below. Have fun figuring out the website. As well as my Twitter, my contact email, and all other relevant information. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.